The sharp crack of a champagne glass shattering against marble freezes the entire room. I stand in the corner, breath shallow, heart hammering against my ribs. The chandelier's cold light spills over Aunt Janet's pale face as two FBI agents stride in, badges flashing like blades. The metallic snap of handcuffs locking around Brad's wrists cuts through the silence, harsh, final, impossible to ignore. The scent of expensive perfume and wine still lingers, but now it's drowned beneath the raw stench of fear. The guests, moments ago laughing and clinking glasses, fall into a stunned hush, every gaze shifting toward me. In my palm, my father's battered Timex feels strangely warm, its scratched glass catching the light like a signal. I know this moment, this exact second, is the one where my enemies finally understand they have no power left to hide behind. But to stand here now, I had to crawl through months of betrayal, nights of hunger, and winters cold enough to nearly kill me. And it all began in the quiet of my own bedroom, the morning I discovered they were erasing me from the family. My name is Claire Parker, 19 years old, daughter of a man whose absence still echoes louder than anyone's presence. My father, Robert, died just 8 months before the day everything unraveled. He left behind more than just memories. He left me a spirit of resilience, though at the time I didn't realize how much I would need it. On the surface, I lived in a house of comfort. Cream carpets, sunlight spilling through tall windows, the scent of my mother's expensive perfume clinging to every room. But beneath that gloss, the air always felt heavy, like it carried secrets too sharp to breathe in. My mother, Karen, was a woman who measured love in carats and status. Brad, her new husband, my stepfather, was a real estate shark with a Rolex always ticking against my future. Our conversations were less family and more transaction. Brad called it opportunity. Mom called it a fresh start. What they really meant was exile. The people who should have been my safe harbor were already plotting how to sell my sanctuary piece by piece. I remember the scrape of cardboard on my floor, the whispers of my belongings being boxed without my consent. Standing in the hallway that morning, watching my childhood dissolve into moving crates, I realized something. I wasn't a daughter to them anymore. I was an inconvenience, a reminder of the man they could never control. And when Brad's smooth voice told me I'd be sent to Milwaukee for my own good, I heard what he really meant. Vanish quietly, Claire, so we can get on with our lives. The cream carpet cushioned my steps, but beneath it, I felt the tremor of something darker, something inevitable. That was the day I stopped being part of their family and started becoming the weapon of my own revenge. It started with a sound. Cardboard scraping against the floor of my bedroom. At first, it didn't register. I had just come back from jogging, sweat cooling on my neck, lungs still burning from the Texas heat. But when I climbed the stairs and heard Brad's voice drifting out of my room, something inside me twisted. Karen, make sure you label that box properly. My room, my sanctuary. The door stood wide open, light spilling across the cream carpet, and there was my mother, kneeling in front of a tower of boxes like some elegant thief. Her diamond ring glittered as she folded my sweaters with mechanical precision. Brad loomed over her, polished shoes sinking into the carpet, as if he already owned the ground. "What's going on?" My voice cracked. Mom startled, but Brad didn't even flinch. He glanced at his Rolex as if I'd arrived late to my own eviction. "Claire, we've been discussing your future. There's an excellent opportunity waiting for you in Milwaukee." Milwaukee, a word that landed like broken glass in my throat. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. She kept folding, as if each crease could erase me. My physics textbooks were already on the floor, my father's old calculator lying discarded, a piece of him shoved aside like junk. "Tomorrow morning," Brad said smoothly, "Your flight leaves. Aunt Janet is expecting you." I froze. Tomorrow. They weren't just sending me away, they were erasing me on a deadline. 8 months. That's all it had been since my father's death. 8 months since I held his frail hand in that hospital bed, his voice rasping, "Stay strong, sweetheart. They can't take your spirit unless you let them." But here they were, boxing up my life, suffocating me with their indifference. I said no. The word tore out of me, sharp and trembling. Mom's head snapped up, eyes cold. "This isn't a discussion. The arrangements are made." Brad's smile thinned. "Unless you'd prefer to make your own way in the world. But remember, our generosity has limits." Generosity. That's what they called it. Letting me live under the same roof where my father's presence still lingered. I was 19. No job, no savings. My father's insurance money locked away until I turned 25. They knew I had no way to fight back, and they enjoyed watching me squirm. I looked around my room one last time. The photo of Dad and me at a science fair, the worn copy of a brief history of time he gave me on my 16th birthday, the blue ribbon from the state math competition. They weren't just packing boxes. They were burying the only proof that I'd ever been loved unconditionally. That night, when the house went quiet, I crept into my mother's bedroom. Her jewelry box gleamed in the dark, but I wasn't looking for gold. Beneath a tangle of chains, I found it, the old Timex watch my father had worn until the day he died. Mom had claimed she couldn't find it after the funeral. But here it was, hidden away like his memory. I slipped it into my pocket. The metal was cool, but it warmed against my skin, as if his spirit was still alive inside it. The next morning, I stood at the airport gate with a single suitcase. Mom and Brad waved from behind the glass, their smiles brittle. Brad was already back on the phone, no doubt calling contractors about the new home gym he'd build in the space that used to be my bedroom. I pressed the Timex against my palm, hearing my father's last words echo inside me. They can't take your spirit unless you let them. I boarded the plane without looking back. They had made their choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. And that was the beginning, not of exile, but of the war they never saw coming. Milwaukee didn't welcome me. It swallowed me whole. Aunt Janet's house looked like something out of a magazine. White columns, polished brick, a driveway big enough for a dozen cars. But the shine ended at the front door. She ushered me past pristine guest rooms, her perfume trailing like poison, and stopped at a metal door near the garage. The room inside was nothing more than a converted storage space. A twin bed, a flickering bulb. "Cozy, isn't it?" she said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. $400 a month, family discount, utilities extra. The word rent hit me like a slap. My knuckles whitened around my suitcase handle, but I swallowed the sting. They hadn't just exiled me. They wanted me broken, dependent, paying for scraps. The days blurred into a grind. Morning shifts at the gas station, nights at the grocery store, school sandwiched in between. I juggled equations by day and mopped floors by night. My classmates whispered charity case, while I hid in the library, surviving on vending machine crackers. The only comfort came from my father's Timex ticking steadily in my pocket, a rhythm reminding me I was still alive. But the cruelty never stopped. Janet intercepted my first paycheck, waving the envelope like a trophy. "Shared utilities. You've been using quite a bit of electricity studying so late." Her smirk sliced deeper than the words. Ben and Chloe, my cousins, laughed behind my back. "The maid in the garage room," Ben wheezed. "Did you see her Walmart shoes?" Each laugh felt like nails driven into my resolve. One night, searching for a missing textbook in Janet's office, I stumbled on her computer screen. My name glowed in an email chain. Keep her busy and exhausted. The insurance money's locked until 25. As long as she's worn down, she won't ask questions. Beneath it, another message from my mother. Monthly expenses received. Will wire more next week. My blood turned to ice. The betrayal was complete. My own mother and stepfather weren't just discarding me, they were cashing in on my suffering, making sure I stayed too beaten down to uncover the truth. I staggered into the cold night, the wind slicing my cheeks raw. Dad's old Subaru sat waiting in the driveway, paint peeling, engine wheezing. I slid inside, the smell of motor oil and peppermint lifesavers wrapping around me like his ghost. For the first time, I let the weight of everything crash down. I had no future, no family, no safety net. And yet, in that crushing silence, I heard his voice again. They can't take your spirit unless you let them. That night, the Subaru became more than a car. It became my shelter. I strung hangers across the back seat, folded my few belongings into neat piles, stocked the trunk with blankets and granola bars, bought one by one so Janet wouldn't notice. My breath fogged the windows, each exhale proof that I still existed. But Milwaukee winters don't forgive. Frost crept across the windshield. My body burned with fever, lungs rattling as I coughed into the darkness. And when the engine failed one night, leaving me stranded in sub-zero air, I thought it was over. Until a flashlight cut through the frost. Uncle Leon stood outside, breath clouding in the beam, eyes steady. He said, "Open the door, Claire." Fear tangled with desperation, but I obeyed. He slid inside, scanning my makeshift life in silence. The closet of hangers, the nest of blankets, the shrine to Dad on the dashboard. Then his voice came low, weighted with something deeper. "I needed to see if you had Robert's strength." The words broke me open. Tears froze on my cheeks as he handed me a lifeline, an apartment above his laundromat, work in exchange for rent, a chance to breathe again. I didn't know it yet, but that was the final shove. They had tried to bury me under frost and hunger. Instead, they'd sharpened me into steel. And steel, once forged, remembers fire. Leon's apartment above the laundromat was no palace, but compared to the freezing nights in my Subaru, it felt like a fortress. 4 walls, a lock, heat that didn't vanish when the engine died. More than that, it gave me something I hadn't tasted in months: space to think. Leon didn't ask for explanations, he just showed me how to work the books. At first, it was simple tasks, logging receipts, balancing ledgers, but numbers had always been my language. Dad taught me that numbers never lie, and soon I saw patterns everywhere. Deposits that didn't add up, transfers made at strange hours, sums bleeding out into accounts I didn't recognize. 3 months later, I found the first breadcrumb. Marcus Holdings, a shell company buried beneath layers of fake transactions. When I traced it further, I saw familiar names: Brad and Janet. My pulse hammered as I flipped through the ledger, each line another crack in their polished facade. They weren't just stealing from me, they were siphoning money from the business, from Ben and Chloe's college funds, from employees' bonuses. And Karen, my mother, was in on it, signing off on monthly expenses as if my suffering was just another line item. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about precision. Step 1 was evidence. I needed more than suspicion. I started copying files late at night, Leon's keys jingling in my pocket as I moved quietly through his office. Each email, each transfer, each accidental expense report went into a growing archive on a hidden flash drive. The glow of the screen lit my face, eyes burning, fingers trembling, but I kept going. Step 2 was allies. Ben and Chloe had always been my tormentors, but when Chloe discovered the acceptance letter Janet had hidden, her admission to Northwestern, something cracked. For the first time, she looked at me without scorn, just betrayal. Then followed days later when his college fund statement showed zero balance. Their mockery turned to silence. Then silence turned to fury. We met in the laundromat office, vending machine coffee warming our hands as we whispered plans. Ben learned to copy files without leaving a trace. Chloe slipped her phone into Janet's study, recording conversations while pretending to text. I became the archivist, threading their scraps of information into a noose. Step 3 was timing. To expose people like Janet and Brad, you couldn't just shout. They had built their empire on appearances. Wealthy parties, marble floors, honeyed speeches about family values. If they were going to fall, it had to be in the one place they felt untouchable, their stage. Ben's 18th birthday became our battlefield. Janet had planned it as a display of wealth, a showcase for her friends and investors. Crystal chandeliers, catered hors d'oeuvres, champagne flowing like water, the perfect setting for a collapse. Step 4 was the hook. We needed the right eyes on them, not just family whispers. Leon contacted his lawyer, who in turn passed our evidence to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. But we asked for one thing: wait. Wait until the night of the party, until every witness was in the room, until the facade was at its brightest. Step 5 was restraint. That was the hardest part. Every day I walked into school, exhausted, hearing whispers about being unstable, dangerous, probably on drugs, rumors Janet spread herself. Every paycheck Janet intercepted felt like a theft of my blood, but I didn't lash out. I let her believe I was still the beaten-down girl in Walmart shoes. Because when you sharpen a blade, you don't swing it blindly. You wait until the steel is honed to perfection. In the quiet hours of the laundromat, I'd run my fingers across Dad's Timex, its steady tick reminding me that patience was a weapon too. And when I looked at Ben and Chloe, faces once twisted in laughter at my expense, now hardened with purpose, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. They thought they'd erased me. What they didn't know was that they'd given me time, motive, and allies. And soon, under the glitter of chandeliers, with their friends watching, I'd make sure the world saw the truth. The plan was set, the stage was chosen, and the countdown had already begun. I blended into the crowd, my black dress borrowed from a thrift store, but pressed sharp enough to pass among the glitter. The Timex on my wrist ticked against my skin, grounding me. Around me, laughter and gossip floated through the air, but all I heard was the rhythm of numbers, transfers, and stolen futures, every lie echoing inside my head. Brad arrived late, his Italian leather shoes squeaking across the floor as he shook hands with investors. Karen clung to his arm, her diamond bracelet catching the light, her smile stretched tight as wax. They looked untouchable, like royalty in their marble palace, but I knew what was coming. I had slipped the last of the files to Leon's lawyer 2 days earlier, hundreds of pages of bank statements, shell companies, forged reports. Ben and Chloe had done their part too. Chloe's recordings played on repeat in my mind, Janet laughing about keeping her own daughter too busy and exhausted to ask questions. Ben's stolen copies of transfer receipts, marked with Brad's signature, sat on a flash drive now in federal hands. The agents promised they would come. All we had to do was wait. Janet tapped her glass, her voice smooth as syrup. Tonight we celebrate family, legacy, integrity, the values that bind us together. The crowd applauded, champagne bubbling, eyes shining. My stomach twisted, but I didn't look away. This was the mask about to shatter. The doorbell rang.
a sharp, simple sound that cut through the music. 2 agents stepped in, their dark suits soaking up the chandelier light. "Janet Williams," one of them said, badge flashing like a blade. "We have some questions about Marcus Holdings." The silence was immediate. A crystal flute slipped from Janet's hand and shattered against the tile. Brad froze mid-step, his smirk collapsing. For a heartbeat, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Then Brad ran. 3 steps toward the back door before colliding with the off-duty officer Leon had planted there, moonlighting as party security. The metallic snap of handcuffs echoed through the foyer, louder than the quartet strings, louder than the gasps of the crowd. Karen crumpled into a velvet armchair, mascara streaking her face. Janet stammered excuses, words tumbling into the silence. "This is ridiculous. Claire manipulated you. Leon betrayed us."
But the agents weren't listening. They laid out the evidence: wire transfers, offshore accounts, embezzlement of funds meant for education, theft hidden beneath luxury. Each word hit like a hammer blow, each document another nail sealing their fate. Around me, whispers rippled. Investors glanced at one another, their champagne turning sour in their mouths. Neighbors clutched their pearls. And in the midst of it all, Ben and Chloe stood beside me, shoulders squared, faces pale but unflinching. The girl I used to be, the one boxed up and sent away, might have looked down, hidden in shame. But that girl had frozen to death in a Milwaukee winter. This Claire raised her chin, met her enemy's eyes, and let the silence speak louder than any scream. And in that silence, I knew the plan had worked. But the real battle, the confrontation they could never escape, was still ahead. The foyer of Janet's mansion felt less like a home and more like a courtroom. Chandeliers gleamed overhead, but the light now seemed harsh, accusatory, casting long shadows over the fallen royalty of my family. The FBI agents moved deliberately, stacking files of evidence across the polished dining table, each document a blade cutting through Janet's defenses. Brad was the first to snap. "This is insane," he shouted, his Italian shoes squealing against the marble as he strained against the cuffs. "I built this family. I made us what we are." His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through the arrogance. The agent didn't flinch. "You built it on stolen money." He held up a ledger, my ledger, the notations I had spent sleepless nights compiling. My handwriting stared back at me in black ink, every careful number now a weapon. Karen's face twisted, rage distorting her beauty. "You little snake," she spat, eyes burning into me. "You think anyone will believe you? You were nothing when I took you in, nothing but a burden." The words struck, but they didn't cut. Not anymore. I stepped forward, the Timex heavy on my wrist. My voice was steady, colder than the winter nights I'd survived. "You're right, Janet. I was nothing. To you. But numbers don't lie, and neither does the truth." One of the agents clicked to the next slide on a projector. Transfers, emails, recordings. Chloe's phone had caught Janet laughing about destroying her own daughter's future. Ben's stolen files showed every siphoned dollar from his college fund. "This is fraud. This is theft," the agent intoned. "And this is a betrayal of your own blood." Janet lunged forward, mascara streaking, voice shrill. "Claire manipulated you all. Leon filled her head with lies. She's unstable. Always has been." For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Then Ben stepped forward. His voice, low but firm, carried through the silence. "No, Mom, she didn't do this. You did." Chloe followed, her acceptance letter crumpled in her hand. "You stole everything from us. You even stole me from myself." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Every eye turned to me. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the Timex. Its scratched glass caught the chandelier light, flashing like a verdict. My father told me they couldn't take my spirit unless I let them. Tonight I'm proving him right. I looked directly at Karen, my mother. You chose their money over me, and now it's all ashes. Her face crumpled, lips trembling around words she couldn't speak. The agents tightened the cuffs. Janet screamed protests. Brad cursed. Karen wept. But the sound that mattered most was silence. The heavy, reverent silence of a crowd realizing they had witnessed the death of an empire. And in that silence, I felt something bloom inside me. Not triumph exactly, not joy, but power. The power of truth laid bare, of betrayal unmasked, of survival made undeniable. This was the reckoning, and they never saw it coming. The night ended not with champagne toasts, but with the slam of cruiser doors. Blue lights washed across Janet's mansion, painting the marble walls in shame. Brad shouted until his voice broke. Janet shrieked for lawyers. Karen sat silently, her diamond bracelet dangling loosely, as if even the gold had given up on her. When the agents drove away, the house was hollow. Guests slipped out quickly, their whispers trailing behind them like smoke. Only Leon, Ben, Chloe, and I remained, standing in the wreckage of wealth that had never been real. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt unshackled. The weeks that followed were a blur of courtrooms and testimony. I spoke the truth with a calm I never knew I had. Ben described the theft of his college fund. Chloe recounted the lies about her future. The judge's words rang like a gavel strike to the soul. 15 years for Brad, 12 for Janet. Karen avoided prison but not disgrace. Meanwhile, above the laundromat, life reshaped itself. Ben discovered a knack for mechanics, grease smudging his hands instead of shame. Chloe grew into her role as organizer, her sharp edges softened by purpose. And Leon, steady, patient Leon, kept reminding us that family is not inherited, it is built. I built mine out of betrayal and ashes, and in that small apartment, surrounded by ledgers balanced to the penny, and the hum of dryers below, we begin to write a different story, a story of survival turned into strength. Sometimes I still touch the old Timex, its steady tick a heartbeat from the past, but I don't need it to remember anymore. I look at the life we've created, the second laundromat opening, Ben's scholarship, Chloe's genuine smile, and I know they tried to erase me. Instead, they forged me. Because the best families aren't the ones you're born into. They're the ones you build, piece by piece, out of loyalty, honesty, and fire. And mine is unbreakable.